Are you important? How do you determine your value? Is your value based on your ability to work? Perhaps on your ability to contribute to society? Is there more to your value than that? How do you view yourself? Is your self perception based on the way other people look at you and think about you? Your social perception? If you think about the way other people view you, do you consider yourself to be important? Is that really the best way to determine your value? How valuable is your life? I hope that to you it is very valuable. What if you and I are the product of material forces, nothing else? What if it is the case that you and I are nothing more than the result of millions of years of evolution, so that we're only organisms reacting to external stimuli and there's nothing else really to us? How valuable is your life? What if we take the elementary composition of the human body, things such as oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, hydrogen, carbon, iodine, etc., and add them all up to determine their value? And what's the value going to be? Well, about $1 US dollar. Not a whole lot. But aren't you worth more than that? Don't you have a higher value than that? Are you more than just a physical being? Do you have a spirit? How about a soul? What about your personality? Oh, you probably know some people that are similar to you in personality, and maybe some of them are your friends. But there's nobody exactly like you, is there? If we talk about your individuality, the fact that you are an individual and there is no one else like you, never has been anyone exactly like you. There's never been another you. There is not another you now, and there never will be another you. You are the only you. Does that indicate something about your value? Are you important? Sometimes we can determine value based on how rare something is, or we might determine the value of something based on the craftsmanship or the artistry or the creativity that went into the making of whatever that object is we're talking about. And maybe at times we look at the price that one is willing to pay in order to determine value. Are all people important? If you are important and have value, then other people do also. And so as we learn about our own importance, we're also learning about the importance of others. And when you begin to realize just how valuable and important you are as an individual, you also must begin to realize that those around you are valuable and important individually as well. And you are important. You are valuable. I know that you are important because of how rare you are. You are the only you. Matthew chapter 10, verses 29 to 31, implies the importance of individuals, teaches the importance of individuals, implying individuality, rarity. There's never been another you, and you are the only you. For that reason, you are very important. But we could also consider passages in the Bible such as Psalm 139, verses 13 and 14, which tell us that you are wonderfully made, craftsmanship. You are the product of divine creation, and you have a human body that is beautifully designed, and in addition, you have a spirit. You are a spirit, and that spirit has been created by God. You and I could also consider your value based on what one is willing to pay for you. And here's what I mean. what one is willing to pay for your salvation, I want to read a passage to you that's going to be read several times during the course of this study. It's a very important passage. We'll just read a little bit of it for now. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 18, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things. You were not bought with corruptible things like silver or gold. Do you think you would be valuable if someone paid gold for you? If your value was measured in gold, what would it be? You're much more valuable than that. Knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. As we continue in our studies on this particular subject, you are important, we'll look at that passage again and we'll explain more and more what it means that God the Son came to this world to die for us, to die for you, to give his blood for you. And so if we are determining value based upon the price that someone is willing to pay, you are most certainly very important. What about the idea of self-esteem? When you look up information about self-esteem, do you find good advice or bad advice? Well, really, you can find a combination of both. Sometimes when you're studying self-esteem, you might look at some information that would actually hurt your perception of yourself rather than help. But at other times, there may be some important advice found in such studies. What about the idea of self-love? I just read this morning an article about an individual that has written a book about self-love. What does that mean? You know, there's a category of songs now in popular music called self-love songs. And if you look back over the last 10 to 20 years, you'll see that there have been a number of self-love songs produced. It is the case that some of those go too far and would promote a selfishness. And we certainly don't want to promote anything like that. It is the case that some of those songs and some of the books about self-love might go too far at times and promote an arrogance. And we certainly do not want to promote anything like that. But sometimes those self-love songs or books contain lyrics that could be found to be encouraging to us, because it is important for you to know that you are valuable. Let's make sure that we don't become arrogant. We want to see our self-worth. We want to see our value and understand our importance without becoming arrogant. The Bible warns against arrogance. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18. Pride goes before destruction, and an haughty or an arrogant spirit before a fall. Arrogance will get us into trouble. Here's part of the problem with arrogance. When you and I become arrogant, then we have trouble seeing the value of the people around us. And so as we consider our own value, we want to recognize that we have intrinsic value, inherent value, great value. But so also do other people. We don't want to become arrogant, but rather we want to love people because they also are important. You are important. As we get started in this series, let's emphasize this fact. You are important as a servant. Mark chapter 10 and verse 45, Jesus Christ, Jesus, the self-existent creator of this universe, became flesh, became man, and was both God and man while here upon this earth. But when he came to this earth, he came, Mark 10:45, to serve rather than be served. If the divine Son of God would come to this earth for the purpose of serving others, as great as he is in every possible way, shouldn't we be willing to serve other people? John chapter 13 is an amazing chapter. It contains a remarkable record of a situation where God the Son served people. It was that time when Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, a cultural thing that was done back in that day and time as a show of hospitality. Jesus and his disciples there in a room where there was a basin and the water and the towels so that the feet could be washed, and none of the disciples would wash the feet of the others. They were too busy fussing and fighting over which one of them was the greatest. But the one among them who really was the greatest, because he is divine, Jesus the Christ, washed their feet. He washed the feet of Simon Peter, the one who was shortly afterward to deny him 3 times. He washed the feet of Judas, the one who would betray him in such a way that would ultimately lead to the death of Jesus, and Jesus knew that was happening, and yet he still washed his feet. He still served him. One who is divine, serving those whom he created. If he can do that, we can do that as well. Philippians chapter 2 talks about humble service also. In Philippians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul is writing to explain to the church at Philippi that it's very, very important that they maintain unity. And they maintain unity based on, in this particular context, humility. That is, if they are not humble, they're going to have a hard time being united. And so the Apostle Paul speaks concerning the fact that nothing is to be done with selfish ambition. Absolutely nothing. Instead of Christians stepping all over each other in order to advance over one another, Christians are helping each other, supporting each other, pushing each other forward. And in that context of Philippians chapter 2, Paul sets a very high standard for us of humility. By looking at Jesus Christ as the example, Jesus Christ is divine. He did not have to rob or steal equality with God. He didn't consider it something to hang on to, but rather he emptied himself in such a way that he could come to this earth and live as a man. He humbled himself to become a servant, to be made a little lower than the angels. In the course of our study, we're going to focus more on what was involved in that later. For now, consider simply this. Jesus Christ humbled himself to become a man, to become a servant, and then to die for mankind. And Jesus Christ is divine. If Jesus Christ could humble himself in that fashion, certainly we should be able to humble ourselves in such a way that we will serve other people. In the book of 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul is addressing a church that was filled with all kinds of problems. They were at times not behaving in the way that Christians should. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, you see that they are fighting with one another again. And so the Apostle Paul has to emphasize the fact that the church is like a body. You have one body, many different parts of the body, but all of those different parts work together for the functioning of the body. And so the church is like that. The church is the one body, and the individual members of the church make up the individual components of the body, and they're all very, very important. And as he's talking about the fact they need to be united and quit fighting, he lets them know that there is something very, very valuable that they need, and perhaps they're missing, that would help them, and that is love. When you and I look at the description of love in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we see that love involves some decisions that we make, that lead to actions that we take, that ultimately show us to be those who recognize the value and worth of others and then serve them. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning in verse 4, Paul writes, "Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil. Love does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. That's really a beautiful passage, isn't it? What if the world followed the teaching there? And what if everyone treated each other in the way that's described in 1 Corinthians chapter 13? Wouldn't this be a much better place in which to live? But I want to tell you something else very important about loving service. Choosing to serve others in a loving fashion actually helps you to be happier. Choosing to serve others will also help you to feel better about yourself. And as you recognize the value of other people to the point that you want to humbly serve those people, you will begin to see more and more about the value of yourself. So choosing to serve others helps you to see your value. Do you feel bad about yourself? Are you feeling as though there may not be hope? Are you feeling perhaps so down on yourself that you're just very, very discouraged? I would recommend this. Start looking to see who you can help. Look to see who you can serve. And the more you help other people and the more you serve other people, the happier you're going to be. You are important. God loves you. And to God be the glory.